Thanks so much for joining us again on an episode of Work Measured. Super excited for our guest today, Ryan. Ryan and I first met at Techstars, where he was the chief commercial officer, but massive amounts of success from early HubSpot to taking the Compass IPO. And now you're kind of doing your own thing as a founder, and we're super excited to kind of dig into that. So thanks for joining Nick and I today, Ryan.
Thanks, Imran. Thanks, Nick. Nice to see you guys, as always.
So, we started talking, when we were spending some time at Techstars, and I think now more than ever, every founder I talk to is talking about go to market and how do you cut through the noise, and what made you kind of launch out there and do your own thing, and what's got you excited these days?
Yeah, I feel like I've had the itch to build independently for a long time and hit the crossroads. I mean, I remember working on this cool little side hustle when I was at HubSpot. I was working with a friend of mine, and HubSpot encouraged this, which was cool. I remember like back in the day, they used to give everybody a portal so you could have your own HubSpot marketing CRM and work on building a business. And during onboarding, you'd set up your own website and use HubSpot. So you became like a real technical expert in how to do web marketing, which was super cool. And I think they really did encourage folks to build outside the walls. Like everybody had a thing going on, which is just also just kind of fueled that like entrepreneurial spirit inside the business. And I love that. I mean, it was infectious. And if you look at that HubSpot Mafia, they call it, like they have like the PayPal Mafia, right? But you look at all the folks that went on to like found companies and raise capital. And one of my peers from that time, Ryan New, he actually just sold Vendor recently, successful exit, which was really cool to see. So big shout out to Ryan New, who's been a friend and a mentor along the way. Um, but we started this little company called Fishing Hire, which is literally just meant to be like if you're going on vacation in Cape Cod and you wanted to go out fishing. It's usually six people on a boat. You'd probably Google it before you went out there. And of course, fishing captains were not the most savvy web marketers back in the early 2000s. And so we just basically outranked them on Google and we're capturing all the bookings coming through and integrating it with their calendars. And it was going really well. Like I think we probably could have stuck with that and built something pretty cool, but career started moving upwards at the time and I made a trade-off. That was one of many for like years. And I was like, went back to stick it out with HubSpot. And I'm glad I did. It was awesome. It was a great experience. But yeah, I finally took the plunge, Imran. I'm doing it.
Now you're on the other side, and so
Yeah,
yeah, congrats to Vendor. I used them at Instapage and super helpful to figure
thanks.
out where we were spending our cash and all these tools, and so that's sort of great to hear. When you're sort of now taking the plunge with like founder conversations, and they're thinking about transitioning that to their first sales hire, and tell us about that process and like what's the advice? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, so maybe like just a quick segue into like why this thing, just to
Yeah.
like paint the like macros on it. So the interesting dynamic is like been an operator, HubSpot, super interesting. People know it, great companies, still root for them. I think they'll continue to do great things as everybody figures out what is SaaS versus AI and how they like. I think HubSpot's got a great story in front of them. And then I did this like Series A and raised 8 million with these two very technical founders. And it was obvious at that point in time, go to market and sales and revenue is like, it's kind of a foreign concept because they're so wedded to and committed to it was a healthcare problem that they were solving. And that's really deeply all they cared about doing is solving that problem. But anything around like systematizing or understanding the flow of how a sales call should go or integrating your sales and marketing efforts, like they're just all foreign concepts. And that's okay because we need experts in lots of things. But I think it became obvious to me at that point in time, like there's a there. There's like a real problem and it exists in a more macro way than just these two founders I worked with in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Like it was bigger than that. And Compass was just another operator story, super interesting, another founder led IPO, which was really cool. And during my time at Techstars, I mean, we were making investments at the pre-seed stage, as we'll continue to do. And for those that aren't super familiar with Techstars, um, it's an accelerator program. It's one of the best in the world. I think what makes it unique is the network. Like the network's super powerful. And my role there was largely working with founders and working with our partners to make sure that we could support startups along their journey. I found a very clear, repeatable problem that existed for our founders that were going from pre-seed to seed to Series A, and decided to spend probably 1,000 office hours with founders over my 3.5 years with Techstars and deploying the TSA 24 fund. And it was consistently hiring the wrong archetype to lead sales, not really understanding or being able to validate that product market fit moment. Like in many cases, you'd hear a founder say, like, we got it. Like, we got it. Look at all these sales. But of course, there's two sides of the equation. It was also like, well, how's churn and your net dollar retention? And like, are those customers growing? And it was pretty consistent that like that mistake was also very expensive. Like getting the first hire wrong was, founders are burning somewhere between 500,000 and 7 figures plus if they made the wrong hire or if they delayed making the right hire. And investors were saying, you need repeatable revenue. You need repeatable revenue. Like you got to take your product market fit and make it repeatable. And so identifying that problem, realizing that most of the help was coming in academic ways, not like operator centric. So like everybody could prescribe that you needed repeatable revenue, but if you go into the tactical and the things that actually have to happen for a founder to take that step, it's pretty difficult for them to have the time to be able to like learn a new concept, deploy it, make the right decisions, etc. And so I started Growth Gold and I launched it. I'm working with a bunch of Techstars founders right now, Imran. You let me know when you're ready to hang out. I know we get together, but it's like,
Yeah.
so it's cool. I was actually on a call with TSA 24 founder earlier this morning, kind of going through our week 4 of this program that I put together, and it's stuff that like becomes second nature when you work on it for a long time in your career, but is such a value add and like really fun to help founders that if they meet their full potential are going to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And to me, that's just like a cool thing to be a part of those stories. So that's a little bit about just kind of connecting the dots a bit on the macros and like what I'm up to.
Okay, cool. Cool story. If I can kind of dig into Ryan the talent piece, every every hire is critical and important, but obviously the bigger the organization and sometimes those hiring decisions and talent decisions aren't well thought through. But when you're at obviously a startup, every early hire is critical, like you were saying. And it seems that's especially true for you at that first sales hire. Can you speak a little bit more about how difficult that really is finding that right first sales leadership person? Um, and is it more the individual? Is it more their skills, their capability, and or is it the processes that you have in place? Is it a combination of those two things, or how much would you weight the two?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you have a sales archetype. So there's a personality, behavioral, et cetera. You definitely need to assess based on the business's dynamic at that time. Um, I think, equally there's founders' ability to assess the environment on what they truly need. Uh, that's especially for a first-time founder, it's kind of tough to say exactly what do you need and who do I need. And often I'm finding as I go through this process, it's like they're not really sure where to start organizing, where their customer data is and how long a transaction took and what the ideal customer profile looked like and how many times they've made a sale in the same way. And then you get into the data and it's like feels like revenue's growing and I'm getting ready to tell a story, but when they're finally pushed to dig in, they're experiencing the first time really learning about churn and NDR, and like they've heard of it and they know it's important, but they've never really looked at the install and understood it in a way to be able to assess what archetype they would even hire. And so the example might be you're adding logos at, 20, 30% year over year, and that's pretty interesting. But you're burning nearly the same or more off the churn. And so, a couple of things there is one, you might not have product market fit if your churn is that high. And so why would you go make a sales hire? Um, or, there's some small tweaks to make. And if you can solve those and maintain your retention, then it is time to start growing revenue. And I think when you're growing revenue and logos and getting ready to hand it off, um, you tend to have not just an archetype challenge, but I think you also have a founder's ability to set that hire up for success, which is also emotion in itself.
Hmm.
And so as you go through this, you start to realize like there are myriad variables at play, and it's a massive moment to take this step. And so I think largely like what I'm finding is the most important thing that you can do at this point for most founders is go through the steps of understanding your business, like get into the numbers and really understand like what is growth and what is retention and who is your ideal customer profile and where's your path to 20, 30, 40% growth next year. And if you know those things and we can have like a really honest and transparent conversation about it, then you can move the weight of that, which is probably 80% of knowing that first, to the 20%, which is figuring out the archetype of the person that you're going to bring in to help you grow the business, whether that's leader, contributor, etc. That's kind of what I'm seeing, Nick, for the
Yeah,
most part.
that's great.
Yeah. And how do you, it's interesting because, like, you know, advice I've gotten, Ryan, has been if it's important for the business, you do it. And I think a lot about that when it sort of comes to selling. And how does a founder know that it's time to transition this to a repeatable system and they can't necessarily scale it? And I think like I'm a lot like most founders where I'm involved in so many things. Like the context switching is crazy day to day, and um, you become really good at balancing that, right? And obviously certain things suffer when you do that, but like how do you make that transition point that I need to bring somebody in that I trust heavily to own the super important part of the business, which is really connected to growth, come in and do it, how do you find that sort of juncture point?
Yeah. Like when is the right time? I mean, I tend to say like, have you made 10 sales that have gone the same exact way with the same customer in the last like 6 months?
Mm,
And if the answer to that is yes, and it's literally like you can follow the process and they went from stage one to stage two to stage five over the same amount of days with the same amount of information transferred between parties, then there's an opportunity for you to get honest and say like, I think I could hand that body of work off. I need to document it, make it really clear, and start preparing more of like a training program for somebody else to do the next 10 sales with that same ICP. Now, I think there's one other just consideration on this, which is often uh, you're exploring a lot of customer profiles as you're moving through this like seed to Series A stage, and you're not ready to commit to one of them for the foreseeable on the company. And there's always irons you want to keep on the fire, and the what would happen if I closed this Fortune 10 company type of thing. Like I, I know they might not be in our ICP today, but if I close that, like that would change the trajectory of our business. So the guidance that I tend to provide there is let's keep that Fortune 10 company on the list, but as you pointed out, Imran, like you should be working on the most important things. So if there are going to be conversations with the Fortune 10 company, like those are for you. And the other mid-market or sales that were made 10 in a row over the last 6 months, let's create a playbook around that we know is going to maintain and grow the install base over time in a more predictable way. So you can still have repeatable revenue and have the whales and the big kind of dreamy opportunities out there, and solve for that CEO working on the biggest thing, but handing off something you've figured out because you haven't figured out all the revenue and go to market, but you've figured out a portion that's going to keep moving the ball forward. And I think it's oftentimes it's just helping the founders see that clearly, and it usually exists in their data somewhere, but it takes a few conversations and like working through it, and they eventually are like, that's the thing I would hand off. It's that customer profile, closes in 45 days. I've run that same process over and over. Like I can get that off my plate. And so that's kind of how that tends to manifest.
Yeah, that's really great. I that makes a lot of sense. And then maybe the founder moves on to like you said, that Fortune 10 or like a different segment and trying to sell through into that
Hmm.
motion. What about like product feedback? Like, I think part of what I see as like an unfair advantage is since I'm so connected to product and I'm also talking to customers, I'm also talking to prospects, I can easily filter that into like what we build next and where we take it. Have you seen great CROs, be able to be that kind of product filter as well? Because it's super important not to like sway in the wind and, kind of have some sort of like North Star, but like how do you control all of that feedback that you're getting through these sales cycles?
I think this is part of the failures of CROs right here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like it's somewhat of a mismatch of what does founder expect of their CRO and what does the business actually need in that moment. And there's probably another vector in there that's like um, there's a communication thing here. Something's broken between like founders and CEOs being able to clearly explain what the mechanics are of their organization and what they need in a way that sales revenue leaders understand it. And so I think often like they jump like a CRO jumps into a role and there's expectation misalignment pretty quickly. And to me that's why you have these like I mean CRO is a relatively new title. It's in SaaS and AI in particular. I mean it's probably 20 years old relative to like career history. It's been around earlier than that in other industries, but as it relates to like SaaS and AI, like you're kind of 2005-ish out of Silicon Valley, you start seeing like the CRO title come up. And it's evolved into doing a whole bunch of different things. And it's also crept into earlier stage companies. Like I don't even know if you really need a CRO for a Series A company most times. So I just start with that. It's kind of like a baseline. And then, on the question about like the product piece, I actually think what you described is what you want as a founder when you're at like seed series A is you kind of want that builder that can work alongside you that understands the language of revenue and the motion of a go to market, but has the ability to think about like deeply discovering your ICP, gathering product feedback, like creating those loops for you. Um, which I wouldn't call a CRO. Like I feel like we should be talking. There should be like a new title or something for that role. But there's a lot of CROs getting hired at that stage right now, and they're young. It's like it's a
Yeah.
different profile than you expect.
Honestly, I'm surprised, right? Like, at Instapage, CRO came in when we were like thinking about raising a Series B, right? And it was the same person who was a phenomenal, Steve Brancali, but he kind of grew up in the organization as a part of it. But yeah, it's super fascinating. I really got to dig into your archetypes because they remind me so much of like our nature types inside of Hatchproof and how we look at it. Can you kind of share what's an archetype? How many different archetypes do you see out there? Do you bucket categorize them and like how do you figure this out? Is this your own magic through years of experience of categorization or
Um, I think I wouldn't say it's my own magic. I think it's probably a combination of just living in the world of having to solve enough problems and make enough mistakes, or I'm like, that's the wrong person. You got to hire the wrong people a few times, and you're like, okay, this is how to think about it. Um, and there's also like, there's probably a whole bunch of behavioral traits that I could overlay and create multiple permutations and various archetypes, but I've tried to simplify it at the stage that I'm mostly working with like seed series A type companies right now. And I try not to overcomplicate. The simplest concept is hunter versus builder are like the two. And I think if you just bifurcate it there, it creates enough rich discussion with a founder to really assess like, what do you need in this moment? The hunter, I would say, is the person that's going to go chase your new logos. They're very driven by commission checks. They love to win. D1 athlete, overperform, achiever, like it's all of that, which can be great if you have a process defined and the commission plan, they're not going to blow up and crush your P&L. And so, it's an interesting archetype for the right problem. Like if that's what you need to solve for, you should solve for it. The builder, I think, is more often than not the right type of person to hire at this kind of seed Series A stage. And a builder can still be motivated to win and close deals, but they're the ones that are not, they're going to come back to you after a deal loses and they're going to say, hey, Imran, like the reason we lost that deal wasn't because I skipped a step in my sales process. It was because I think there's either a competitive challenge out in the market that we're losing on a feature or a function, and or I've had this similar call, not just once, but it's now 5 times and they're asking for the same feature in the product. And so there's some pattern there. We should think about bringing it back to development. That's your builder. And I think you're trying to, you kind of need that person in your corner. And again, like you can call them a CRO, but like it's a Swiss Army knife role that doesn't have an effective title today, is what I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. And to Imran's point, right? Like connecting back into product and what's missing because they're on the front lines of having those conversations with prospects, right? And that's super valuable insight for product and engineering to know. But if that CRO is not bringing it to them, then they wouldn't have that insight.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that you did touch on, Ryan, that I find interesting is kind of, let's call it the dynamic between founder and that CRO. Founder-led sales is obviously important, but it's only up to a point that it can be successful. But the tricky bit, I guess, is that this is the founder's baby, right? This is what they created. And then it's incumbent on him or her to be like, and here's half of this baby or some portion of this baby to this CRO.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not always an easy handoff. That would be like a real mother or father being like, here's my.
Oh, I have some days, Nick. I would be like, you take care of him, like for
Yeah,
sure, easily now.
Sure. Moses in the basket in the river. When does it work well or when does it not? Maybe that's an even more interesting case study.
Yeah. So quick story on this, which I always have a flashback of. I started at HubSpot on the enterprise team, which was a brand new group. And we were trying to figure out if we could make that segment work at the time. So it was still the CEO of Halligan, the super closer at the time. And, Halligan's CRO is the one who hired me for the role, Mark Roberge, but Halligan walks by my desk, it must have been day one. He taps me on the back and says, hey, you're the new enterprise guy, right? I said, I am. And he looks at me and goes, don't fuck it up. I don't think it ever leaves a founder's body that they have like pouring their heart and soul into a thing that just they believe so deeply in, and they care about every interaction inside and outside the walls. So you do, I think you have to hire somebody that can appreciate that can connect and build the trust with the founder. And so that relationship, especially early, I think needs to be just super tight. But I'll also comment that like, I don't think it ever goes away because I watched founders involved Series C, D, beyond in deals that they really care about. And like they wanted to talk to customers and they wanted to stay close to the business. And so I don't think it ever goes away. So if you're assessing a role as a CRO and you're going to a founder-led business to be the CRO, like you have to appreciate that. And you have to be prepared to operate in an environment that's not like going into a PE-backed company that's had all the executives placed in to run its course. I think they're fundamentally different operating structures with different cultures, and you have to appreciate it. Now, like another like wild dynamic on this is like I think technical founders are probably struggle with this quite a bit because they're largely selling on the technical parts of the product that they understand so intimately. And when you hand something like that off to a revenue or sales expert, it often can feel like disingenuous as you listen to your product be pitched out into the market.
Yeah.
So I don't have all the remedies, but like I'm just kind of calling out what the things are that happen. And where they tend to go the best, I think, is just there's got to be a tight relationship and a lot of trust between that early revenue leader that the product will be represented well, every customer will be handled with care, and then you have to execute on that, a handful of times for the founder to say, okay, you got the next one, go ahead.
Yeah.
I think that just has to happen. Some human behavior in there, if you will, needs to work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. We've almost gotten 26 minutes and we haven't even talked about AI. Where does that kind of fit in here for that first sales leader? Is it helpful? Is it helping? Is it hindering as part of like kind of embedding in the process? There's just so many tools out there now within the tech stack. It's kind of
Yeah.
noisy, right? And like, how do you sift through what's helpful or not?
There's probably two parts of it. One is the AI impact on whatever product you're building and delivering to market. And then there's like the AI impact on your org design, structure, prospecting, emails, follow-ups, like customer experience type things. Um, I think at this stage, like you probably have a relatively small go-to-market team if you're Series A. I think the largest impact is actually on the product development timelines because things can be built so quickly that a technical founder, for example, might get one nugget of product feedback and build and solve for it versus like looking for sufficient patterns. And if you are a revenue leader in that environment and you're looking for patterns and you're trying to systematize and you're trying to create repeatability, that is like a recipe for major frustration. And I'm seeing that happen the most. Early young CRO works a technical founder. They hear product feedback once. Founder says like, no, we're going to build it because we can build it for the deal. And you're ending up with a lot of bespoke, solutions that you're building. You're not really building for a true marketplace at that point in time. And that's hard to be a revenue leader in that
Mm.
because both of those people end up sitting at the next board or investor meeting having to explain like what's happening and where's the repeatability. And the revenue leader is more often than not going to get blamed on can't forecast, didn't hit the number you said. And it's all because of this shifting environment underneath. And that's just a really hard job to have.
That's really great insights, and we totally see that, and I suffer from it, right? Because it's so
Yeah.
easy to now build, and always try to keep honest and say, hey, let's get some customer feedback before we jump into sort of building this out as well. And so, Ryan, we've certainly enjoyed having you here. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience? And Nick's got one last question for you. That it's kind of like a tradition on the show.
Okay. I guess the thing I would say is like, if you're a founder working on your go-to-market and anything resonated with you today, find me on LinkedIn. I got a Substack that's Ryan Spillane. You can follow me there, post weekly, and always happy to help where I can. Love seeing founders succeed. So that's what I'd leave you with. And Nick, I'm dying to know what's the question.
So the tradition is when you interact with your AI of choice, assuming you do you say please and thanks?
Ah, you know what's funny? I do say please and thanks. I don't say thanks. I say please. Yeah, I say
Okay.
please. I never say thank you because I just expect the work will come back.
Yeah, yeah.
But I always, yeah, that's a
You're
good question.
courteous. You're
I
courteous.
am. I am
Yeah.
a courteous AI user.
Yeah. Is it out of fear that when the bots take over, you'll be in their good books?
Yeah, I'm building. It's karma and goodwill. I'm building with the bots. You got to start early now. That's what I heard.
Yeah, yeah. We have a Roomba style vacuum thing, and my
Yeah,
daughters will sometimes like yell at it and mistreat it, and I say, you got to be nice to the because you never know. You never know. It'll sprout legs and limbs one day, and you want to be in its good
yeah.
book.
These are lessons that our parents were not teaching us. So it's
Yeah,
amazing how quickly that changed. Be nice to
yeah,
the bots.
yeah. Exactly, exactly. Well, thanks, Ryan. This has been
Thanks,
this has
guys.
been great. Good chat with you for a long time, but yeah, Imran and I both really
Awesome.
appreciate it.
Enjoy
Thanks,
it,
Ryan.
guys. Nice to see y'all.
Awesome.